Now we are back with Dominique. I just had to pause that because I believe that we were not, the live stream was locked. Thank you for those who have been messaging me to say that the live stream was locked. Let me know now if you are in the audience and that you are here and the link is going live. I think, yes, we are live. Thank you for the people who let me know that our live stream wasn't going. In between the last session and this one, Riverside have changed their settings, and so now we have to unlock the live stream. So if you have missed the beginning, I am so sorry. Welcome to Dominique's live Q&A. As you know, phone in your questions to Dominique. Dominique, we're talking content strategy, compelling stories. Press that button and you will come live stream into the studio and I will interrupt Dominique. If you've missed the first part, it's already been recorded and we will add this when we go live. If you're in the audience, thank you so much for messaging me to say that you couldn't get in. Put your messages in the chat. And Dominique, we are going to carry on with our questions where we were at, and hopefully our audience jump in on any of these questions. This is a big one and one I am interested to find out. We can talk about call to action. What makes a great call to action in fundraising campaigns? You know, you've got decades of experience, and can you share an example, one that sticks out over the last couple of decades, a real powerful call to action that stands out and it works really well?
When you work in, creative development, often working with designers and copywriters, you come up with these amazing ideas and clever taglines and things like that. And I'm sorry to say that simple is best.
Yeah.
Don't try to be clever. We actually had a client who was doing some online straight to IG acquisition. They tested two calls to action. One was something like, become a champion for children or something like that. And the other one was like, become a regular monthly giver and become a monthly regular giver one, because people knew what they were asking. So it's yeah, I think one of the things I've learned over 20 years is this, getting back to basics and getting the fundamentals right. And then by all means, test, tweak, see if you can do some stuff. And look, I'm sure, I know there have been campaigns that I've seen, not necessarily involved in, that I've seen that I've just gone, oh my God, that is genius.
Yes.
But I can't think of them off the top of my head.
Absolutely.
And even with prep time for the questions, I was like, nothing's coming to me. And basically I was like, you know what? That really does sort of come down to just keep it simple. Don't complicate it.
Yes. And if you're in the audience, pop it in the chat or call in and tell us of a call to action that stood out for you, that made you go, yes, that's got my attention. I'm going to do what you've asked me because it's compelling and it's inspired me to do what you're asking me to do. So moving on, we look at kind of approaching the balance of storytelling, and this is I'm going to read out the word for word what I've got in this question here. So I have here, I said, how do you approach the balance between storytelling and data and content strategy for charities to ensure both emotional engagement and credibility?
So when you say data, do you mean statistics or data as in the analytics that you've gleaned from?
The analytics that the organisation has, Yeah.
Look, to me, there should be absolutely no conflict between the two. You should always start with really good storytelling, but I think the data, what comes into the data is sometimes how you the emphasis you put on different elements of that story. So for example, if someone has responded to a survey and said that what they really are passionate about is research that you're funding rather than the support or the helpline or whatever it might be, then you can skew the story to a research angle, because that donor or that segment of donors, that's what they really care about. So you can craft the story a little bit to take into account what you're seeing through the data. But really, to me, that comes through more in the how much you're asking for, how often you communicate with somebody, what channels you use, and what sort of stuff. So really, those things should be working in balance. I think you can get away with just telling good stories and raise money, but when you add that layer of really good data analysis and sending the right thing to the right person at the right time and asking them for the right amount of money, I mean, that is gold. That's where you really can start to elevate your
It is, and that's when we talk about donor-centric approach, and it leads into, I guess, my next question here, which is about donors' feedback and how you kind of infuse that into your content strategy. And you just gave a really good example there of, if you are doing surveys, what a beautiful way to segment your kind of your messages and what donors want. And that is, really focusing on what the donor wants out of the organization. Again, looking back, is there any organizations you've worked with that do that really well, that really put the kind of the donor at the heart of their communications?
Yes. I think the thing to remember, when they do, it really does make a difference.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways, smaller charities have an advantage in this, because if you've got a really tiny little database, you kind of, you can have a relationship, not necessarily, face to face, but you can have some sort of relationship with almost every person. If you've got 500 donors or 1,000 donors, you should kind of know who they all are, right, to some extent.
Yeah.
And so working out, people still sort of say, oh, my donors are different to other donors, or, people in New South Wales don't do the same. It's garbage. I mean, donors are donors, right? People who want to give you money want to give you money. Yeah. So, to me, also donor-centric is people often get it really right within the communication. So it's like, the variables are all there, and they're telling someone that they've left up a question that's amazing, and they, RG plus cash, like they segment the donor, the appeal comms to within an inch of its life, but then, the thank you is generic, or they don't really follow up, or when they send something, the impact report, they don't personalize the cover letter. I mean, I remember, actually, I think I was doing more stuff with clients in terms of variables and data, 10, 15 years ago than I am now. It's almost like people have, I think things have been simplified, which is probably right, but also I think sometimes we're missing a trick, because we have so much data about our donors, and I think most people just aren't using it particularly cleverly. I think it's sort of an untapped resource, really, is the data. But also, it's like, well, you have to have someone in the organization who knows how to crunch the numbers, and really work together with data, the data people and the data team and the fundraising team to kind of go, okay, even when you're crafting your survey questions, what do we actually need to know about people, and how are we going to use this information? Because people just ask all these questions and then never use the data, right? And it's like, I'd rather you ask me 4 questions and then, really come back to me and make me feel like you know who I am. Yeah.
Yes, almost start backwards. Start with the donor journey and how you're going to, how you're going to love them and look after them, and what you want to achieve on that side, and then create the questions in the way that you know how you want to send the follow-ups. Yeah, I hear this quite a lot. Organizations, they kind of they want to go out and do big acquisition campaigns, but actually they're not set up for the work that's required after the acquisition, and that's where we see a big failing. Again, if you're in the audience, you know how much I love a phone call. Press that green button. A reminder that if you do call in, you will be on screen, and you can ask Dominque a question yourself. Ask her, ask her any questions about, the copyright, and how long should a story be? How short should a story be? What is it that, what is the tips and tricks that you might have right now, the burning questions you might have, or pop it in the chat as well. I will interrupt Dominque at any point if a phone call comes into the office. Dominque, looking back over your career, you've worked with over 400 charities. Has there been one where it's just you look back and go, God, I did a good job. I love that campaign. It's still memorable for you, and it got the results in terms of engagement or kind of finances. Is there one that stands out?
Yeah, there's actually three,
Yep.
and I'll tell it. And I'll just won't give you too much detail because they're all very different. So one was a fundraising appeal for Heart Foundation, which I worked on with people many years ago. But, and I've done a lot of similar ones since, I think, but it really drove home to me because I was still fairly new in the sector and as a copywriter, etc. If you have a strong story to begin with, a strong case study, the rest of the appeal just falls out of that. It's so much easier to do a strong campaign when you've got, very emotional case study, really good detail about it. We had a drawing from a kid, the absolute classic trope of, stick in the whatever. It was a congenital heart disease. It was about a young girl, etc. It was just, glorious, and it went gangbusters. And since then, I've seen that sort of happen over and over again. And conversely, if the story's not that strong, it's just that much harder to kind of get, the blood from the stone. The other one I'm really proud of, and I'm not sure if they still use it, but years and years ago, I worked with a friend of mine on MSF RG conversion, where we came up with this. Don't ask me where it came from. We spent a lot of many hours, strategizing this one, but so we came up with this tagline was change the way you give, because we were converting cash givers to RG, and it was like, how do we convince them that this is a good way to change? And I think it ended up on Sophie as an example and stuff like that, and it absolutely worked. It went berserk. And then the other one, again, a long time ago, was working on the very first Lost Dogs Home supporter survey, which was going to be online. And I'd never done an online supporter survey. And actually, the same person I worked with on the MSF piece, we spent hours plotting out exactly where we were going to send people, the donor journey, but the UX journey within that survey. Really working out where would they go next. If they answered the survey, then they got an ask, and if they didn't answer the survey, they still got an ask, and trying to work out exactly what was going to happen at each point. And again, it sort of it totally went off for them, and those experiences really taught me about making sure you plan out from beginning to end, how something's going to go, and then what people get next. You should never be working on an appeal in a vacuum, or a piece of communications in a vacuum. It's like, what did people get before? What are they getting next? Where are they at? And so those experiences really have helped me
one of the
down the track.
One of the things that kind of I just take nuggets from people here and there, and how people communicate with you generally indicates how they want to be communicated back. So if they send you an email, they like emails. If they send you a letter, they like mail. If they text you, I don't know, if they phone you, do you think there's a truth in how a donor communicates back to an organization is indicative of how they would like to be communicated to?
I think that's a fairly good rule of thumb, right? I mean, if I have a friend who can just keeps sending me little voice notes. That's how she doesn't text or message. She sends voice notes.
Yeah,
and I don't listen to them.
Yeah.
So it's like she's a bit younger than I am, and so we sort of have this disconnect in terms of how we communicate. And so a couple of days ago I went, I really should listen to those, because this is
this how she way of communicating.
So, but even when I do, then I still text her back. I don't voice note her back. Anyway. So yeah, I think people. Something you were asking about before, just because someone says that they don't want to get communications from you, or they only want to find out this, or doesn't mean that's their actual behaviour. So I think the thing about that is, if someone consistently is doing something, then that's probably a good indication of the actual behaviour, versus I only ever want to receive emails from you. But if they, if they only respond to text messages, then actually, email's probably not the best way. So I think it has to be a combination of what people are telling you, what they're actually doing, and then just common sense, right? I think too that sometimes, if you recruit someone online or face to face, the accepted wisdom is, don't bother sending them DM packs because they're just not going to respond. And I think that seems to be pretty true on the whole. But there's no reason why you can't send them a little postcard or a birthday card as that sort of surprise and delight thing, because it's something that really clearly something very different for them. So if they're not used to getting stuff in the post and they're not likely to respond, something which is like a handwritten or something a bit different, I think can have a lot of cut through. And I suspect 100%. with the proliferation of digital and AI, there's that sort of nostalgic sort of Frankie magazine, everyone's learning how to crochet and make, sourdough, because I think humans really do crave that tangible, lovely, authentic things that we're kind of missing out on a little bit. So I think you can sort of shock people by going, here's when I was in Japan a couple, last week, I was sending people postcards, and people were like, oh, I love a postcard. And I love sending them. I love buying a stamp and writing a silly message, and then it always arrives a week after you get back, which is part of the charm.
I was just about to say to you, one of the most brilliant pieces of simple copy that I just shared on my on socials recently was the current campaign that's going around with the New Zealand Post and Beyond Blue. It's a beautiful campaign. It comes in your mailbox. It's beautiful decorated birds. It's a postcard that you tear into, and it says, send a message, share a memory, or tell someone you're thinking about them. And New Zealand, the post has been paid for. It's a postcard, and it just made me, I was like, this is brilliant. It's Mental Health Week coming up, and the idea that they have sent you this to send to someone, it just made me smile. And there was no ask there. There was nothing, but what it did do was put Beyond Blue at the forefront of my mind. And if I was going to, they've been able to inspire putting the cause at the forefront without an ask, but also allow everyone to participate in doing something wonderful. I mean, it's just a beautiful campaign.
Yeah. I think that also points to a really important thing, which is relevance. So if you have a clever idea and it's really closely tied to your cause, then go for it. I think when something is disconnected between, it's just clever for clever's sake, but it's not actually very, relevant or contextual, if you can tie things in, that's brilliant. One other thing I wanted to say, that whenever I've tried this or told someone to try it, is writing a letter from a dog. If you have an opportunity in your organisation, we've done this with Make-A-Wish New Zealand, and obviously, Guide Dogs and Cedar and Visions. Doug the Pug, a little girl wanted a pug dog, and she got one, and they named it Doug. And so we wrote the letter from Doug the Pug, and it tripled income or something. It's ridiculous. So that's my hot tip. If you've got a chance,
letter from an animal,
write the letter from that animal. And because even though people logically understand that the letter has not actually come from an animal, they kind of believe that it has.
Yeah, that's brilliant, fantastic trick. The Friday afternoon in the office, write your letters from a dog. I love it. A reminder again, we don't have much time because we did have 10 minutes prior to this that you missed, which is going to be added to this recording because you guys were locked out. Do call us in. I'm sure Dominique would love to see a face, and I know we've got some people in the audience there. So thank you for staying with us. I'm sure you're picking up some hints and tips along the way around charity content. Do you have any questions? Pop them into the chat. Remember, if you call, you will pop up on this screen. Dominique, a couple of questions before we kind of wrap up. One of them is, and you kind of briefly touched on it before, but in terms of small charities on smaller budgets, what is you mentioned actually they have so what's the tips you have for creating great content on a small budget, which is a big problem for a lot of charities that we know?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me is reusing and repurposing what you've got. because certainly the bigger charities, the tendency is to every single appeal, they come up with a new story and a new angle and a new pack and a new whatever. And I think people think that's what you have to do, but actually you don't. I mean, you can, God, I've seen charities over the years just send exactly the same year on year, not forever, but, you can actually reuse, repurpose, resend stuff. And actually also elongating your campaigns, sending stuff beforehand to say something's about to arrive, sending follow-ups, sending, 3 waves, not worrying too much about the sort of tax deadline and the Christmas deadline as these sort of slightly arbitrary cut-off deadlines. A lot of charities very successful. I know MSF is one of them that will send, the Christmas follow-up in January. I think particularly if your charity is not especially aligned with, Christmas as a thing. It just happens to be a time of year where, sure, people are feeling a bit more givey and, obviously it works for a lot of charities to send stuff then. But having said that, a lot of them are starting, sending their appeals in October now. Well, for me, in October mailing is not a Christmas appeal. I'm sorry, it's a I don't know, spring. But yeah, so I think if you've got a strong story, put the effort into getting the stories, getting the detail, getting the photos, getting those lovely, doing a nice long interview, getting the buy-in from the person, doing videos, thank you videos, etc. So get a lot of nice content from one story and then milk it for all it's worth. Because the other thing too is I always find we engage our donors with these extraordinary stories of hardship and struggle and resilience and, death and life and whatever. And then you never hear about that person again very often. And I always have that, like, where are they now? Whatever happened to, Mary, who I was so, emotionally engaged with? And it's like, poof, she's just disappeared. And now Robert's taken her place. Okay, now I have to get engaged with Robert. And it's, I think charities are missing a trick because obviously with the thanking, with the impact reports, with newsletters, absolutely no reason why you can't, keep updating me on, what's happened with that person, reminding me of their story and using them again as a sort of the poster child.
Brilliant. You're so true, because even if their life now is that they're happy, they're healthy, they're adjusted, they've got married, they've got a new job, that's the stuff we want to know because we know the hardship they've gone through. But even 5 years later, you're right. Where are they now? What a beautiful campaign. I know working with the Child Cancer Foundation, we had ambassadors every year. And you're right. Their stories are intense and they're overwhelming. But even I missed them when they went because you're like, oh, wait. And, I'm fortunate outside now. I still keep in touch with some of the families. But actually, what they've turned into is a story in itself.
Yeah, and I think there are some charities that do this quite well. So for instance, if you're fundraising for scholarships for refugee students in high school or something, I'd love to know what do they actually go on to do, what job do they have now, etc. And if you're a long-term donor and you can really see that progress and it's reinforcing that helping a child at 5 or 10 or 15 or whatever it might be, it really does have that impact. When you look at whenever I go to a Smith family. Thank you lunch or whatever, they always have a student who was sponsored previously talk about what that experience was like. They might have been had a really hard time at school, and then suddenly they got this sponsorship, and that totally changed their lives, and now they're a lawyer and a counsellor and a this, that, and the other, and and you literally get goosebumps in the audience, and you can't necessarily use their current story as a fundraising ask, but it sets you up beautifully for the next one. Or to say to someone, well, actually, can you give us a bit more? Or
because of you, this is what happened.
Can you leave a bequest?
Now, because of you did this, you can now do it again. I've got one quick question before we wrap up there, because I've just done the ethics module again on the for FIA. And there was quite a few questions around content and privacy and permission. And with organisations, when you say they repurpose content, particularly with the turnover of staff, there's a position there where they may not have well documented the consent for old material, and the staff have changed over. And so I guess there's you got to have some good, if you've got great content that you know can have a longer kind of shelf life, putting policy in place to make sure that content can be repurposed longer than they might think it's going to be.
Absolutely critical. And I think this is a big issue in, resource poor charities. Having processes in place and policies and things like that, that's exactly what goes by the wayside when you've got a lot of churn or just, it sort of happens, I think, in any organisation, any business. If you when you lose that, sort of knowledge base of what, how to find someone. So yeah, I think a real key is to, when you get permission from someone, is to, kind of get as long as you can, 2 years or 5 years usage or whatever. Definitely try and keep in touch with someone. I think if the information is a bit more controversial or what's the word? If it is quite, exactly. If it's sensitive information, then of course you're not just going to keep using the same story, over and over again. Having said that, I've seen a cold pack recently that's been running for like 5 years, with someone who died from cancer, and it's like, is the family still okay? Keep sending that out. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure they've asked the permission, but it's like at some point they're just gonna go stop. We don't want to, you to keep using the story. But if it's good stuff about where they are now and what's happening over, then there's going to be less of a problem with someone, allowing you to use their information. I guess people do change their mind. The life circumstances change. I know Wayside Chapel sometimes has issues where they've got someone who is in a good place when they interview them and use them in an appeal. And then sometimes even before the appeal lodges, the person, something changes or they go backwards. Or conversely, they go, I've got a job now. I don't want anyone in my job to know that I was once homeless. So can you just can you just take that down? And you absolutely have to respect that. Yeah, I think it's as much process and policy as anything else, right? And just respecting people and asking them. I used to work as a journalist, and one of the things I hated was like door stopping people. I didn't want to trick people, And the good thing about fundraising or feature writing is that you do have an opportunity to go to someone. Here's what we're writing about you. Is this okay?
Yes.
And most of the time they might change one or two little things, or they just go, yeah, it's absolutely brilliant, thank you. I think in 20 years I've only had twice someone go, no, you can't use that. Sorry, no.
Yeah.
And actually one time it wasn't them, it was their family.
Yeah.
So you're pretty safe. And so people have that opportunity to look at it and go, am I okay with how I've been represented, etc. And, 99% of the time I'm absolutely fine with it. So.
Brilliant. Dominique, it's been wonderful. Time has flown by, and we will add our first 10 minutes with no audience when I was saying, please call in when we weren't live to this recording. Thank you everyone in the audience for being there. I can see you're still with us, and thank you for joining us. Dominique, it's been really insightful. You've definitely answered some questions for me, and as always, we love hearing about your experience and what you get up to. So thank you for your time with us today. Audience, we'll be in touch next time. The next Maven Q&A is coming up in a couple of weeks. And thank you again. Brilliant, Dominique. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Michelle.
Yes, thank you. And I'll just remind you, Dominique, live. Stay in the studio when I press stop. And we will see you all next time on Maven Minds Live Q&A. Goodbye, everyone.